All right, it's your boy Crypto Blood, and welcome to another Kickin It Session. I've got Dr. Jim Willie, Golden Jackass. He's back with me. It's been about 2 months, Jim. We've been talking for about 30 minutes prior to recording, man. So glad to have you back on, Jim. How are you? What's this song here? Driver's Seat by Sniff and the Tears. Never heard of it. It sounds good, though. 70s,
Is it playing?
right.
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it. No, you'll have to hear it when you watch.
Oh,
if you watch
okay.
the video.
Okay, that's okay.
How are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. You know, we got weather change here. Most people don't understand Costa Rican weather has a severe change to the positive in late November, early December, and sometimes a little later on in December. It's never the same.
Mm-hmm.
And the winds increase. And after you get through that for maybe 10 days or so, we get a glorious summer, which is like 4 months of hard to believe how gorgeous it is. I mean, like 75 degrees, mild breeze, almost perfect
how
sun.
How long does that last?
4 months till about April.
Okay.
April or May, right in there. One
Okay.
time a few years ago, it was the end of March, and a lot of people were upset, and so was I. But you never know. You might get a couple of really spectacular months, like July or August, out of nowhere. That's the rainy season. They got a 7-month rainy season, but it's never as bad as people might think. It's just the afternoon for a few hours.
Gotcha.
I've been stuck in torrential rains where it was covering my socks.
Wow.
On the streets, but that was 08 and 09, and hasn't been that bad since.
Okay.
And when it's really not bad, they get different problems. They get electricity shortages because something like 60 or 70% of Costa Rican electricity is generated from hydroelectric. So they want some rains. Fill up those.
Before we started, guys, I was going down a list of countries in South America. Jim was getting mad. I'm like, what about this place? What about this place? Move here. And he's like, nah, man, Costa Rica is ripe with corruption. And really the last one left is, you said,
Panama.
What? Panama.
Panama's better.
Yeah.
In general, most of these Latin countries are, I hate to say it, but shitholes. With no respect for contract law, no respect for document integrity.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty tough. If you're going to come down here and enjoy some years, just don't invest in anything. Rent.
Gotcha.
If you want to buy a condominium, just be extra careful by hiring 3 different attorneys to check your title. 3.
Wow.
Not 1, not 2, because the recommendation for the second might be his friend, and you don't know it.
Wow.
It's just incredible.
Yeah, we've been talking. Jim and I have been talking, guys, before we started recording, and I'm sure many of you already know. He's been going through a lot down there, really since kind of started in 2017, and he's been hit with so many different things that he's dealing with down there with the corruption in Costa Rica. And he would love for you guys to, if you have any extra cash, go over to golden-jackass.com and hit that donate. You'll see that big yellow button. Hit that donate. Send Jim some money to help him out, fellas.
Well, I should just give a quick summary. I didn't know we were going to lead off with that, but the difficulties I've had were after the first 3 or 4 years where I did some nice, what do you call it? I hate the word charity, philanthropic type work, helping a family with a couple of room additions for their little kids who were growing up, so they didn't have to sleep with their mother, just a lot of little things, and they were successful. But I ventured out of my realm and got into a couple properties and immediately encountered fraud with titles. And they pay off an attorney $1,000 to falsify a title in order to hide $40,000 in debt. And you'd think that, oh gosh, well, I just got this title and it's got some debt locked into it. I'm just going to pass it back to the previous owner. Oh no, new owner, new obligation, screw you. They figure we get the one who is by the balls now.
Wow.
So then it was contractor fraud, condominium. We thought, oh, let's get a pre-construction condominium and, put you and your little boy there, and, get a pre-construction attractive price. Well, that's all gone because of the water contractor fraud. And after he stole the money and went to Panama, a new guy came in and he committed fraud. So back-to-back fraud that cost over $30,000. It's just ripe with fraud everywhere. When I first started talking about the fraud, I began getting contact us messages from people who also suffered fraud here, but also suffered fraud in Ecuador, which apparently is even worse.
Worse, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Someone wrote me and said they tried to steal my home, they stole my bank account, and I got out of there with my life. And I feel good about it, and I'm not going to worry about the losses. I heard about somebody else with a dairy farm who had a friend with a multi-million-dollar dairy farm, and it was all stolen from trumped-up environmental and water violations. I've got stories of victims of murder, victims who are, how you put it, victims of, it's not a kidnapping, the technical word is called misprison. 3 men, rich guys, were held at gunpoint and machetes in a hotel room for 3 days by 5 guys. Okay, it's not kidnapping. They didn't take them anywhere and, ask for ransom. What they did was they asked the 3 men, the Americans, we want $100,000 or $200,000. Come on, you guys are rich. You're good for it. Well, they all said F you, and before you knew it, the guys vanished because they were running out of time and patience. And instead, they turned it all around and arrested one of the victims to try to squeeze a couple $100,000 out of him by using a judge, an attorney, and a police captain who fabricated a bunch of bullshit. And my friend of a friend spent 9 months in prison. Didn't give up anything and finally left and said, I'll never set foot here again. It goes to contractor fraud, where like a woman I know, a friend of mine now, she contacted me, we had lunch. We talk shop about what's going on with the dollar and all that, and it's all fun. But she did a room addition and a bathroom addition, put a second floor on, and she got in trouble with the contractor because she realized she was paying for 2 sites. He was billing her for materials on another site. So she complained to a police officer locally and got herself an attorney. And before you know it, both of them were trying to extort money from her.
So, there's fraud everywhere, right?
No, I'm sorry. I don't buy that.
No, what I'm saying is
systemic, Jim, top to bottom.
What I'm saying is, Jim, there's fraud everywhere in the world. But is it that there in Costa Rica, is it that the judicial system just is corrupt as well, where they can't enforce?
Yeah, 70% of attorneys are dirty. 50% of the judges are dirty. I got in trouble with something even bigger than all the previous things I mentioned. The truck and car parts business, small percentage owner, and the guy was committing gargantuan crimes internally with his warehouses. Just think of insurance fraud and various things like that. And they nailed all of us. There are 8 of us that had to go before the court. And the judge said a year before, give me $12,000, I'll make sure that everything's kind of light. Oh no. A month later, a different judge heard about it and said, give me $12,000 or I will make sure that it is not light. And then a year later, it's a $100,000 fine. They didn't do anything. They just collect fees.
Oh my
it's unbelievable. I've not heard of a single attorney who is dirty ever get thrown out to lose his license. I only know of one case in the United States with 40 years of adult experience. One case in 40 years in the United States, not a single one here. And I got defrauded from another guy who took $3,000 to do my residence application. He didn't do jack shit, and he blames the guy in the immigration office. The immigration office blames him. They lost all my documents, and I can't retrieve one.
So people are probably listening like, well, Jim, just come back home. I said the same thing, but you got to understand, Jim, he's got a lot of stuff going on there. He's fully committed there now. and it's not something that he can just get up and just leave and come back home. There's a lot
got too many routes. Too many routes here in 5 different areas. I need to learn how to make do here,
and you will,
and get by. And I think I'll be doing okay. This has been a pretty bad year. Pretty bad year. It's closing out, and it's pretty bad. And the donation key has done very well for me, and I'm grateful for people, and I can assure you all that three or four nasty areas have been closed down and sealed off so that there's no more damage.
Yeah. And it's funny, guys, because when we started recording, he actually just got a donation. So people are supporting, and
I looked up in there
going.
In a particular email account tied with the PayPal. Somebody made a donation.
Cool.
It's nice.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Very grateful for all of them, and I've got to say that I'm extremely grateful for several large donors and one benefactor. And without them, not sure. I think I would have shut down the newsletter a couple months ago. So it's been that bad. It's over a couple $100,000. It's much more than that. And it's cash loss. This is straight out of savings, and I lost a pension just to pay the $100,000 fine. You have no idea what can happen here. They have no respect for the law. I had just a funny story to close this out. I have a client from New York City, and he said, "Gee, I'm going to come down and visit you. I think we're going to have some fun. Let's go and check out the park and maybe go to a eco tour." I said, "Well, you can go on an eco tour. I'll go to a park with you and walk around, but I'm not going 20 miles out. I just don't do stuff like that anymore. I did before." And I said, "Don't rent a car, Jerry." His name is Jerry also. "Don't rent a car, Jerry." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, because I've heard of cases where your own car rental agency will steal your front grill or something else and then bill you $2,000 for it, and then the next day put it back on after you're gone." I got 3 or 4 stories like that. I got other stories where I overheard a conversation in a restaurant. A guy was complaining about a $70,000 car loan for a Range Rover. And he said, I paid it down, finally paid it off, and I couldn't get my title back. He wanted 10 grand. It's just everywhere you turn, everything they do has an angle. And part of the Latino culture that I absolutely despise is if you got an advantage over somebody, use it, squeeze, get your money, because you might be the victim next year. And I've seen this done within families. My gal just got defrauded from her cousin for over $1,500. 2-3 years ago, I found out that her aunt was defrauded by a lifelong friend. $4,000. A lifelong friend. So if you have an advantage, use it, squeeze them, because you might be the victim next. Get them before they get you. It's one of the worst things I've ever witnessed in a culture, and I've seen it repeatedly here. So, I'm trying to just mind my own business. As my dad said, stick to your knitting, which is the newsletter and the interviews and a couple of little things on the side. And so far, so good in the last year. But I got to say, the cleanup sometimes takes over a year on a single project. After you've got criminality, fraud, whatever, a complete mess like a roof caved in or a fire from shitty construction, it'll take you a year. It could take you a year. With one, it took 18 months, and we're finally trying to get a seller lined up, and nothing's easy. Absolutely nothing is easy. The cleanup is very expensive after you fix the fraud.
Jeez.
So, that's my life here. And, I was within an arm's length of ruin a few months ago, and I set up the button for PayPal donations, and it's worked out very well. And what it's done is it's attracted attention from some very nice, generous people. One guy from Switzerland, a woman from Florida, another fellow from Texas, a fellow from Latin America who doesn't want anything known.
Yeah, I mean, because Jim, I mean, you've been online, man, really, and with your newsletter, you've been giving people many years. Now, how many years for the newsletter? Is it 11, 12?
No, it's 15 and a half.
15. So you've been putting in a lot of work for many years in the alt media realm. I've been following you for maybe, I think I want to say about 7 years, 6 or 7 years myself. So, I mean, people appreciate your work, People, I think, really do appreciate it.
I'm overwhelmed by the wave of goodwill. I really am. I get people saying, God bless you, you're doing tremendous work, you're doing mission work, as you say, and you're a valuable asset to the alternative media, and that's all fine, but I'd like people to help me out. And nothing's easy anymore. Nothing's easy.
No, it's not.
I'll find out in April how easy it is when the Irene rape service kicks into gear and might want their cut from donations.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell them, F off.
I don't blame you.
Okay, enough of all that.
So yeah, man, it's been about 2 months now. Some things have changed. One thing I want to talk about just really briefly, Paul Volker. He passed away, 92 years old. What are your thoughts about him as a Fed chair? I mean, it seems, for me, I wasn't born, but just kind of looking back, seems like
before you were born. I know, isn't that funny? And
crazy.
I was I was a kid just out of college going into graduate school, and then Volker. Okay, so that's our difference.
Yeah. So
I have firsthand experience.
You have firsthand experience. I want to hear from you, because from what I see, I'm like, this is the last real Federal Reserve chairman that didn't do things for a popularity contest. It was more so he was doing things to really try to change and help the economy.
I don't know.
All right, well, help me out. Okay. I want to hear.
All right, well, let me just go through a little bit of my own sequence.
Okay.
I watched firsthand what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, when I was in my 20s, I was admiring him after college.
Okay.
During my early years, graduate school, etc. I got my master's in 77. I got a PhD in 1980. So those were his years.
Okay.
And that's when I started reading Wall Street Journal a little bit. Not a lot. I was busy. I was up to my ears in graduate school in Carnegie Mellon, where they kicked my ass.
Mm-hmm. And
I worked hard. So I'm not reading Wall Street Journal every day. Every few weeks I'd pick it up and take a look at some of the interesting articles. And I like the essays more than I did the market wrap of what happened to the Dow Jones today. I couldn't give a shit about the Dow Jones. And I'm then migrated to Barron's after graduate school. And I picked that up every single week for, I don't know, it was maybe 5 or 7 years. I mean, I had a pile of Barron's. I put them under my bed, and eventually I had that to be the support for the middle area of my bed to prevent any kind of a bow effect. Okay, so it was my block in the center. And that's great for when you want to do a pig pile with a couple kids, or you want to entertain some woman with some horizontal activity. Okay, so anyway, here back to Volker. Volker did something bold. You mentioned that he wasn't really too interested in popularity. Yeah. What he did was he allowed interest rates to go up a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had an official Fed rate of 14%.
It was the highest ever we've seen.
Highest ever. We've never seen anything like it, and we can never see anything like that
remotely
again. We cannot see anything even half that bad. We cannot ever see anything a third that bad.
An eighth.
Because back, after the Vietnam War ended, which I escaped by the skin of my how should I say, skin of my armpit. I was in the draft lottery. I was in the second draft lottery. And I
didn't know that.
Yeah, in 1971, I let loose my eligibility because I had a Pennsylvania number of 231. They only made it up to about 160, and I was never to be eligible for the draft after that.
Wow.
Okay, so anyway, Volker appeared to be a fair broker.
What does that mean?
He appeared to be a person in position of power in the banking community, the banking officialdom.
Mm-hmm.
He appeared to be a person who could see a problem and say, therefore, we must have this market reaction.
Okay.
He appeared to be a person who said, doesn't matter the effect of this market reaction, we must have it in order to rectify things. But a bigger question should be asked, because I had kind of an interesting, not a debate, just a conversation with one of my jackass colleagues who has tremendous COMEX experience, like 17 years of COMEX experience in Chicago, both metals and paper. By that I mean gold, silver, and also interest rates and bonds. He had half his career was metals, half his career metals and agriculture. The other half was financial stuff. Mm-hmm. And he said, Jim, you got to think of, why did he need high interest rates? And I thought, well, I'm not really sure. I think it was because we had such raging inflation following Vietnam. And he said, yeah, we had a lot of deficits. The first trillion was Vietnam. The second and third were related somewhat, but more having to do with, deficits and problems and, expanding welfare state and things like that. He said the problem back there in the 70s was the dollar started to slip, and because of all the deficits. Okay, the early birth pangs of our 22 trillion in debt was selling off the dollar in the effects. So Volker came in and said, let's raise interest rates and repair the demand for the dollar. Mm-hmm. It's really as simple as that. Okay, now, what's the bad side of Volker? Well, his breath stank from the cigars, but that's okay. If he's only breathing on congressmen, who gives a hoot, right? But I don't think he could dunk a basketball either. I think you probably could. Anyway,
he was 6'7". He's better being able to.
But he had white man disease. Come on, so do I. So do I. I've touched a basketball rim one time in my life.
I actually can dunk. That's funny you say that. I actually can dunk. I really can. At 5'10" and a half.
Oh my gosh, I'm 6'0" and I've touched the rim once. Okay, let's not get into all this, because people will say, "Come on, Jim, don't want to get into racial stuff." But I like to joke around with people of other types.
Absolutely.
But okay, here's the dark side of Volker.
Okay.
Volker, when he had to defend the dollar, raised interest rates, but when he was raising interest rates to help the dollar, to support the dollar, he was realizing that as the dollar went down, the gold price went up. So he not only saw the need to publicly defend the dollar with higher interest rates, he saw the need to privately defend the dollar by slamming gold. Volker is the first guy to slam gold, not Greenspan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So how was he able to keep interest rates high and simultaneously slam gold? What did he do?
He eliminated the opportunity to buy it on the futures market.
Oh, okay. All right.
He said we're going to make it a sell only market.
And this is not the Reagan taking us off the gold standard thing, or
no, that was 71.
Yeah, this is not that.
That was Nixon.
Nixon. I'm sorry, Nixon.
And after Nixon was Ford, and after Ford was Carter, and then after Carter was Reagan. Can I tell you a funny little link to reality about Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy.
I'm just a peanut farmer from Georgia.
Right.
Jimmy, who's his grandfather?
I'm not sure.
Who's his father?
I'm not sure.
Why do we only hear about his mother when he was president? Miss Lillian. Who's his father? He's the only president. Well, I'm sorry, can't say that. Bill Clinton never talked about his parents because he actually facilitated the murder of his mother.
Oh my God.
She knew too much.
Not the Clintons.
Oh yeah.
Couldn't.
Who's the father of Jimmy Carter? And why is his brother not from the same father? Billy Carter, the guy well known for urinating at public meetings against a tree. Jimmy Carter's father was Joe Kennedy Sr. How's that link work? Oh, pretty easy. Miss Lillian was Joe Kennedy's secretary.
Wow.
Miss Lillian is Jimmy Carter's mother, who never talked about Jimmy's father, never talked about Billy Carter's father and how they were different men, while Lillian was the secretary for several years to Joe Kennedy Sr. and took a leave of absence to have a baby. And she never was hurting for money. Okay, so we've got all this hidden Camelot bullshit in American politics. Why did the Clintons not have a natural child of their own? Chelsea's not fathered by Bill. Come on. Chelsea's father is Webster Hubbell. Why did Bill and Hillary not have a child together? Because they're both Rockefellers. They didn't want inbreeding. Take a look at Chelsea's mouth, put it next to Webster Hubbell's mouth, and you go, whoa. Okay, Webster Hubbell's the father. Where'd Webster Hubbell come in? Well, he's part of the whole Rose law firm and the gang of thieves in Arkansas. Okay, it's just one filthy royal Camelot private elite party for our presidents. Reagan was unwanted. Oh, there you go. Oh my gosh, you got it.
That's funny.
There are lots of pairs.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Lots of pairs. Notice how Chelsea doesn't remotely look like Bill.
No.
Not remotely.
No. I mean, look at that, people. What is going on? What is that morph of?
The front top center, those two look very good. Anyway, if you like the side-by-side pictures, I've got one that you can post. Oh gosh, I should email it to you so you could post it. Are you that fast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. All right, here we go. Now remember, on 9/11, it's really ironic. On 9/11, she collapsed entering the limo, and a lot of informed words said she did not survive that bout. Okay, so who's going to finish off the debates and speak intelligently like 2 months later in October? The CNN debate was not Hillary Clinton. It was her clone. And it's a very good clone. She looks about 25 years younger. The hag, I call it the hag. You're going to see a pair of Hillarys in a minute, I hope. Okay. The hag is 73 years old. And the young creature, the clone, I don't know what to call her. And there's a little story about that. There you go. The hag on the left, 73 years old. Now, anyone who thinks that that's makeup and just, revitalization with skin cream and maybe a trip to the spa, you're a moron. Okay, that's 25-year difference. The one on the right is somebody who's on the order of 48, 50, 52 years old. And that's the creature who's running around London right now, talking shit about Trump and Breaking Bad about maybe possibly running for office again.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I
Why
didn't
did
know. Listen, though, I didn't know, Jim, that Elizabeth Warren was the oldest on that panel the other night for the Democratic debate. She looks. Is she a clone? She looks like 45 years old.
I don't know. I actually don't follow quite so much anymore. Um, I like to point out a couple of little things regarding that election. The NSA, about 6 or 8 months after the inauguration in January of 2017, the NSA came out with a report that's gotten zero publicity. It said that Trump won by 12 million votes. 58 million for Hillary, or the new Hillary, versus 70 million for Trump. And they justified as follows. They removed all the illegal votes for unregistered voters. They eliminated all double counting votes, and they eliminated all dead people votes. And the result was a 12 million victory for Trump, the largest in the history of the United States. What I was doing during the summer months of 2016 before the election, I was examining polls.
Okay.
I had a course when I was in graduate school. It was called finite sample theory. And a better word for it is the analysis of polls. The strategy of poll taking. Survey construction and design. Stratified random samples. Like if you're trying to estimate what percentage of the public favors Hillary, you try to set up distinct categories, like 8 categories, whatever, demographic, wealth, combinations, just liberal, conservative, farm, urban. You create 8, 10, 12, 15 different categories for your demographics. And then you sample each one of them. You would not believe the increase of accuracy. It's called stratified random sample. So what I did was I backed out and just thought, okay, why are these results different? You'd have an NBC survey, you'd have an ABC survey, you'd have a Gallup survey, you have something else survey, Washington Post survey, CNN survey. And I thought, wait a minute, these should all be close. Now, is that a real difficult topic for even the moderately educated? They should all be close. Aren't they measuring the same thing? And they were not close. We had some polls. Okay, I'll just give you an example of the most egregious bias, but not an intentional bias. A bias of online users. Online people who have apps, smartphones, they're online, they browse a lot, they spend a few hours a week or more, and they got polled. And it was like a 30% lead for Trump. And I thought, well, okay, that's got a built-in bias. Obviously, it's hardly described as a random sample.
Right.
Okay. And not expected to be an unbiased, keyword, unbiased. Okay. So when you're a statistician like me, you look at 2 polls and the results are different. You say, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? And the first thing I did was ask for, well, what is your spread? Because they try to describe it to the untechnical, the non-technical types. This is a survey of 1,000 people, and the results are 90% confident of plus or minus 3%. Okay, that's the lingo. Or 95% confidence, plus or minus 3%. So if they come out and say that 35% favored Hillary, plus or minus 3%, with 95% confidence, then you know that you're 95% certain. And I don't want to get into a tough probability framework because it gets messy. It's tough to really envision. I can do it, but just think of it, 32 to 38% is where Hillary's true percentage is. And here's the best probability statement I can make. Your sample is going to capture the true 95% of the time. Okay?
Gotcha.
So you take your estimate and you go plus or minus, and you say 95% confident. You're not saying probability, you're saying confident, which is kind of a flip side because you don't know. Anyway, it gets messy, but just think of confidence. Okay, anyway, if you've got one poll and it says the lead, notice the lead for Trump is 8%, and another says the lead for Trump is 28%, your antenna should go up and say, "Whoa, what's going on here?"
Deviation is too much, too great,
too much.
Right?
It's well, I don't like to use the word deviation.
I know
the disparity of two polls is so grand that one or the other or both are fraudulent.
Right.
Okay. Now I said the difference. Okay. Hillary alone was plus or minus 3%. Okay. The difference is something that they sometimes reported. They would say Trump's got a 7-point lead, plus or minus 3%, 95% confidence. He's got a 7% lead, so it's 4 to 10, and you're 95% confident that he's ahead by 4 to 10%. Okay, they've already done the subtraction, okay?
Yeah.
They've come out and said plus or minus 3%. They always like to have plus or minus 3%. Seems like a natural goal. I personally like plus or minus 1.5 to get it more accurate, but they want error. They want disparity. Okay, so you have two different polls, and they're saying, well, Trump's got a 28% lead. Another one says Trump has an 8% lead. And I say, wait a minute, what's your confidence range there? Plus or minus 3 points on each of them? Okay, here's the magic that it comes in. I know we're getting way off astray, but it's kind of fun.
No, it's all good.
It's all good. If I'm a statistician and I'm saying, well, I've got this poll, and I got this other poll, and we can assume that the population is so large that no two people are in both samples because we're talking about millions of voters. Okay, and you might have one person in both polls. You might have two persons in both polls out of 2,000 people. Okay, ignore that. Just ignore that. It's a nit. It's a nit. Okay, if you've got plus or minus 3% on each, what's the confidence range in percentage for the difference of two polls? You multiply it by the square root of 2. It's the square root of this squared plus that squared. It's 1 squared plus 1 squared, which is 2, and the square root of 2. Okay, so 1.4 times 3, it gives you about 4 or 4.2%. So 28% versus 8% is 20% when it should be within 4% or a little bit more. So that's more. It's 5 times more than what it should be, and the conclusion is fraud.
Yeah.
And in the following months, go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of, no, you can go ahead. I just want to interject and tell you about, I want to talk about this fraud we've got going on in the House. But go ahead. I'll let you finish your thought, though, on this whole 2016 thing.
The difference is so grand that the next question that burns to the table is, what is their bias?
Yeah.
What did they do wrong? And was it intentional? And in the following months, we heard stories from CNN that got leaked out. And the person who leaked it might have gotten fired. That they double sampled the Democrats on their potential sample lists. Gotcha. So they did a stratified random sample, had 8 or 10 different categories, and doubled the amount that they did for all they expected to be pro-Hillary. That story came out in 3 or 4 different polls through leakage. And I said, obviously, come on. Okay, very simple stuff. but looking at the square root of 2 idea, if they say that this difference is plus or minus 3%, they might say it's plus or minus 2%. Well, multiply by the square root of 2 and you get 3%. They should not be big differences ever, unless you're dealing with an egregious, intentional display like the online poll. Let me explain one of the most historically wrong polls ever in modern history that got a lot of attention. It was Dewey versus Franklin Roosevelt. Now, you had New York Times front page covers saying Dewey wins when Franklin Roosevelt won, and he won by not exactly a small margin. What did they do wrong? Why did they think Dewey would win? Because the whole story on the New York Times was from an Atlantic Monthly magazine poll. Is that a random sample? No, that's an elite sample.
Yeah. That's
an upper crust, upper income sample. And Roosevelt appealed to the masses because he wanted to fix the Depression. He wanted to create, public utilities like TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, electrification. He wanted to set up some safety net for the people, and the people voted for him in droves. Okay. He was probably the first guy to really install roots of socialism in the United States. And, you get into a big debate. When is it public service and when is it socialism? My answer is when the benefits come to one particular lower class. If you're talking about water supply or electricity supply or plowing the roads of snow, that does not tilt toward one lower class income group. Therefore, it is not socialism, it's public service. Okay, utilities are public service. Everyone needs water. The poor need to wash their food, to wash their clothes, and to flush their toilets. So do the rich, except the rich would prefer to hire someone to take a shit for them. Anyway, let's get on to finance. We've dabbled around and it's all been fun. I enjoy this.
Before we jump over there, though,
go ahead.
We talked about in your email. You said the USSA. And where we are in America, man, and you call it a banana republic. Why that title? And me personally, Jim, I don't like to, I don't really get too political on the show. I do on Twitter, but I have to voice my opinion about things. And what I see going on in America, man, is something that, again, I'm not too old, but this is shocking what's going on with this whole impeachment situation. Now we've got Nancy Pelosi. She won't even send over the articles to the Senate. She delayed until after the holidays. What is going on? This is unprecedented.
Well, I don't have all the answers, but I do have a few.
What's your take on it? We just want to know your take.
I have a few. Trump began an investigation about pilfered funds in Ukraine. And that was his no-no. Trump investigated by calling the Department of Justice. Remember, part of the Department of Justice is still Obama hangovers, leftovers. Okay, so there were some investigations that began, and they looked directly into Biden for what Biden had been doing with the Ukraine.
By the way, he publicly on record bragged about quid pro quo. But okay, go ahead.
Okay. Biden and his son have pilfered funds designed for Ukraine and reconstruction. Let me back up a little bit. Just a quick preamble. The pattern of the United States is decide on what country, usually a defenseless country, can be pretty much destroyed with an invasion. Then we set up a reconstruction fund, and then the elites steal it.
Yeah.
We did that in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
We set up a $5 billion fund that Halliburton and Kissinger ransacked.
Yeah.
Okay, and not much went to rebuild the nation. We talk about nation building when all we do is nation destroy.
Mm-hmm.
And the nation building is very limited because the bigger piece of that is the elite pilferage of the nation building fund called the Reconstruction Fund. Okay, well, Joe Biden, VP, and his son Hunter, who's all over the news, they can't protect Hunter Biden as much as they can protect Joe. They started to have a group of investigations, and there was more than one. And Joe Biden was at the center of a lot of it. And missing money, accounts, sweet deals like, to buy a bunch of property, huge tract of property where they believe gas fields are on. No bid process, and Hunter Biden won it. Well, why did Hunter Biden win a no bid contract? What's he doing in there? Well, it's obviously elite favoritism. Okay, so you combine the fraud from the carpetbagging with the fraud and theft. It's not fraud when you steal $1 billion. Christine Lagarde set up a huge IMF fund, and it got rifled also. So the U.S. was involved, IMF was involved, Biden and his buddies stole a bunch of it. So Trump began an investigation, and within weeks, the impeachment began. You think they're related?
Right.
Well, if you think they're not related, I think you're a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat fool. And there are lots of them. And I just go down the ladder. If they get dumber and dumber and more blind and gullible, I said, well, you're just a free shit army member, card-carrying member. I got a twitch, sorry. Anyway, it's getting ugly, and I've got an opinion. That's a picture of me from about 3 years ago. I looked a little younger. That was before all the fraud and investment losses here. I think I look a good 6 years younger there. But anyway, I have a firm opinion. This is the last thing I'll say about politics. I really don't like politics. I think politics is the domain of the small mind. If you can't make it in business, run for politics. If you got a little bit of education and you don't know how to do anything, maybe consider teaching. My opinion is Trump saw this coming with the impeachment, and he was amused by it. Mm-hmm. And he said, let these idiots run. Let them run right over the cliff. Let these fools keep running so hard they lose their clothes.
And that's what they're doing.
And that's what they've done. The House is dominated by Democrats, and the vote pro-impeachment. By the way, impeach just means accuse, doesn't mean kick out.
Well, you got a lot of, and this is what I'm saying. I was telling people this prior too. I'm like, you guys understand. Evidently you don't. You think that when you impeach a president, he's kicked out. That's not how the process goes. But you got just a lot of really uneducated people, Jim.
It's a majority, I'm afraid. I like to say 90% of Americans are just dead between the ears. That means 10% are alert. And of those 10%, 90% are lazy beyond belief, intellectually lazy. So that means you got 1% who are active and intelligent. Mm-hmm. And they oppose the 1% elites. I got little itches. I'm sorry. I can't help it. So my opinion is that Trump was amused by it all. The Democrats voted apart along party lines. There were very few deviations. And if there were no deviations, the vote would have been extremely similar to what we saw. So they voted for impeachment. And the impeachment just means that the Senate is now obliged to consider, not do, but to consider a trial. And it's an impeachment trial. And if it's a loss for Trump, he's kicked out. And I believe the vice president takes control. If it's a win for Trump, he continues. So my belief is that he let the Democrats go too far in the House. And now the Republican-dominated Senate will never even have a trial.
Yeah, it's not even worth it.
Not going to go anywhere. So what Trump has done is exposed his enemies.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of reports out there that Pelosi's not been seen in public for 5 weeks. She went to Jordan seeking asylum. I mean, the Middle East nation of Kingdom of Jordan, seeking asylum, and has not been seen publicly since. And these impeachment videos might have been older videos, but when I see a picture of a bunch of characters pushing for impeachment, I look to see what states they're from, and they tend to be almost always New York and California.
Pelosi's California, right?
Yeah, but it's more than that. It's Schiff.
Yeah, Shifty
it's
Schiff.
Schumer.
Yep.
And more. Maxine Waters.
Oh my God.
She's one of the
man.
biggest fools around.
I'm trying to tell you.
There are lots of fools.
God,
there are lots of
man.
fools. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I got one smart colleague. I have trouble sitting still. You can imagine all the trouble I got when I was in grade school. And just I didn't want to sit around, so I crawled in the back and went into the cloakroom and shot spitballs at my buddy in the back of his ear, and then snuck back in the cloakroom and got back in my seat. And they would say, "Mr. James, what are you doing?" And I say, "Nothing. I'm paying attention, sister." Anyway, I think Trump has isolated his enemy, the camp. And next, we're going to see what happens to them. There's more than one person who is rumored not to be seen in quite a while. And I don't want to get into all that. Let's go to finance. Unless you got something.
So, as far as the gold, man, I sent you an article that I found pretty intriguing. I talked about it on my channel, I think last week, but there's been reports that, and this has been going on since 2016, I believe, that a lot of cash and a lot of physical gold is actually disappearing out of supply, meaning that people are starting to hoard this stuff in excess amounts. It's not touching the normal market flow. What do you have any intel into this type of activity, or what are you seeing on your end with the people that you keep in contact with in the precious metals market?
Well, first, cash.
Yeah, cash. Mm-hmm.
If you think something is coming down the pike, you think a shitstorm's coming, you're going to load up on cash and put it in your shoebox, put it in your wall safe, put it under your mattress. Okay. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's more than a little bit. I'm hearing Germany is hoarding cash in a big way. Wow. Germans are hoarding cash. Now, I think that's a response to their Deutsche Bank woes.
Okay. Makes sense.
Deutsche Bank is in deep trouble. But let's just think about banking rather than people. When a bank is in trouble, they struggle to keep their liquidity flowing. Yeah. That might mean that they'll sell some of their impaired assets. It might mean that they sell some of their easily sold assets. In other words, they're least impaired. What they tend to do is they sell their worst impaired assets and their best assets to raise cash. Okay? Another cash hoarder is the CIA. If they've got billions in profits from narcotics, they might put it in their special bank, who are the favorite banks for narcotics money, but Citigroup and Bank of America. Okay, so other sources just might want to put the money away and keep it out of the banks because they fear maybe the bank failure, which could be followed by bail-ins. I personally don't believe any bail-ins will happen to the Western banks. I think they happen to the third world banks, like Cyprus. That was a trial run. That was. Let's see what happens. This could be fun. Let's see what happens if we bail in 30% from a defenseless country like Cyprus. Oh, let me back up on Cyprus because it is not a simple story. Remember Cyprus way back in 2013?
Yeah.
Okay. What was going on there? What happened?
A whole bunch of you Russian stuff going on, right?
Exactly. The Russians were using Cyprus banks as a conduit to move money out of the West
and Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I don't think they had much in the way of banks. They might have, maybe, but Cyprus is a big bank center. It's a big offshore European bank center along with Malta, but Cyprus was bigger. Anyway, the Russians were using it. Their central bank had direct connections with the Cyprus banks to move money out of Europe back to Russia in the form of gold bars. So the United States wanted to stop that. Okay. And we bailed in order to take a cut of all those Russian accounts.
Yeah.
Okay. So, now, last thing I'll say about cash is I've been following the money market. Money market is a good kind of a canary in the coal mine. What's going on in the money market? Well, that tells you who's got shortages of cash and liquidity problems and where they might go. How's that going to all work out? How's your strain in the money market? How's your links between the money market and short-term treasuries? How is anything breaking? And occasionally things are breaking in the last couple of years. And money market strain told me 2 years ago that this entire tightening is going to be a failure. Money market was the thermometer to tell you strain here now, not a barometer. But you could say, well, it was a barometer for bigger problems down the road. Okay, that's probably true too. But there were cash pressures back then, 2 years ago. That told me that we're going to just stop this QT tightening, quantitative tightening, one of the stupidest suicide exercises ever done by elite banks. It was 3 years.
Did they know that wasn't going to work, and they just wanted, it was kind of an optics play? They would just want to kind of show face and say, hey, we're trying to do a responsible thing here, but they knew they would have to end. It had to be, right?
I think it was partly that, but it was partly scuttle. I think they were arrogant and confident enough that even during a forced breakdown, that they would have Hillary in office, Macron in office, Merkel in office, Theresa May in office, Theresa May, and that whole big group of four could manage the global fascist state installation. But Trump came along. Trump interrupted, I believe, the scuttle. And he's going to go down with a lot of mixed, mixed impressions. A lot of good, a lot of bad. He pretty much wrecked the U.S. farm sector. I'm sorry to say it.
No, everything he's done, I'm not, like, that's the thing, like, people, you can't be 100% for one person or another. At the end of the day, you got to understand this is it's bigger than any president, right? You got a lot of moving parts in the deep state and stuff. So what can Trump really do, in 8 years, in 4 years, in 8 years, in 16 years? Like, what can actually be done? This whole drain the swamp thing, I'm not really,
I'll get to Trump in a minute, but I just finished the cash answer. The gold answer is that there's a lot of elite hoarding of gold. There's a lot of central bank quiet accumulation of gold.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too. Yeah.
They see the bond crisis getting worse and worse. It's like a big building slowly on fire. And my analogy is that Wall Street and the government encourage people to huddle into the big building called treasuries when it's on fire. But it's only on fire in certain spots. And now with the repo bond problem, it's on fire on the whole first floor. Okay? Pretty soon people are going to say, wait a minute, you want me to huddle into the U.S. Treasury building when it's on fire? I could die in here. And what is death but bond default? So people, including pension funds, mutual funds, and a lot of different prudent savers are massing into treasury bonds. But notice that it's having trouble going down in the bond yield because there's bigger supply coming in. There's now rumors that we're going to be over 1.5 trillion in the deficit this year. We're tracking at 1.8 or 1.9.
Man.
So the supply is coming in. The problems are being hit. The repo is making bad publicity. So we're having trouble encouraging more people to enter the fire-strewn Treasury building.
So I'm hearing that the yield is starting to steepen now, Jimmy. What is that?
Yeah, more
what
supply.
Is going on there? Okay.
More supply and fear from the repo. So the
does
money
that
backing
mean
out.
that things are fixed? That's what the mainstream media is. Yields are steepening. That means everything is okay. No more flattening of the yield curve. What is your assessment?
That's a pure lie. The yields are steepening because the supply is so great, and people are realizing that the bond building's on fire.
All right, there you have it. Part 1 with Jim Willie, new Kickin' It Session, and we've got much more to come in Part 2. If you want to see Part 2, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also click that bell to receive a notification. It's your boy Crypto Blood. I'm out of here. How?